Show me the money.
All right, show me the money's here. NFL picks for week number 5. Joining me today, somebody new to the NFL picks, but not new to the podcast, who I spoke to him back in March on the last pre-pandemic episode of the podcast. We were talking about Seton Hall basketball. The great Chris, not the Mad Dog Russo, is here. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Mike. And once again, I have to say, the pandemic has not changed the fact that there is such good pop culture production value on this show.
Yeah, and speaking of pop culture, I mean, the pop culture has gone up in spades since you were on the podcast, and we've basically made a weekly recurrence because of the pandemic.
Yeah, that was, it's been madness, and it's a real shame because we had a great opportunity to call some games for Seton Hall, but I think the fact that we've even muscled along and are getting back to some sense of normalcy even with sports is just a blessing.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, I know this is not the college basketball spot, but I mean, I think you got to be excited that we're getting college basketball back in the end of November. I think it's going to be nice because after the baseball wraps up at the end of this month, there's going to be like stretches of the week where there's no sports on apart from football.
Yeah, it's going to be, well, I mean, first off, you're going to have 3 days and really only parts of Thursday and Monday where you have football. It's going to be a little difficult trying to manage college basketball. I'm amazed that they even got college football to somehow work. And even then, that's still kind of a mess. But it is going to be very nice to have college basketball back. And, I say it's Seton Hall grad. Seton Hall's promising, but it should be overall an outstanding college basketball season so long as we can keep people safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I trust that this is going to be better organized than college football, where it's sort of like a free-for-all where ACC does this, Big Ten does this, they change their mind later. But there seems to be like a national plan for like what the standards are for college basketball. I think that does make things easier.
Yeah, certainly.
All right, let's go to the NFL. Obviously, they had their own COVID issues. We got to talk about at the top of the show with the Tennessee situation where they had to get the game postponed, get the bye switched around, and we had the scare of New England. So what's your thoughts on the COVID situation with the NFL? How do you think they're handling it?
Well, you know what? I thought that the NFL was bound to receive positive COVID tests this year because they're not using bubbles. I understand that's tougher to do over a 16-week schedule, whereas in hockey and in basketball, it was just kind of the immediacy where you only had to fill out the rest of the season. Whereas NFL, you have to start from scratch. MLB, they went to a postseason bubble. You know what? Football is not to mention football is a contact sport, and the fact that it went so long without a positive COVID test was either a lie or a miracle. Yeah, so I think the NFL is going to have to be even more careful when it comes to players returning as opposed to other personnel. Sean Payton, for example, because of the on-field contact. But I think maybe the most frustrating part of this whole process is going to be trying to reschedule all these games. Because baseball, you play 162 games a year, or you played 60 this year. It's a lot easier to schedule it. But each game for the NFL is so precious when you only play 16 in a season. So you really have to wonder if the NFL is actually going to even consider bypassing games if the games are unnecessary, like the MLB would. So if it doesn't make a difference in terms of draft order or playoff spots, could the NFL just skip games?
Yeah, so I thought at the top of the show, I said, maybe the NFL should have put in like a week 18 to allow themselves more time for give themselves options to reschedule games. And then again, you run into the problem of okay, what if you don't need only 2 teams need week 18? Then you're going to have punish the top seed, giving them basically 3 weeks off between the end of the season and the playoffs.
Yeah, but you know what the funny thing about that is, people have been saying for years we should get a couple more weeks or maybe 1 more week so everybody gets off for the Monday after the Super Bowl because it's President's Week. But it's going to be you might actually get that happen. But the thing is, people might not be going into work in February anyway. We really don't know.
Yeah, we definitely don't know. And one thing's for sure, the New York teams will not be there when having this problem in February with the football, because I talked about this last week. I know you're a big New York football guy, but this is probably the ugliest it's been in a long time.
Well, considering they were both this bad, yeah. I think they both have some promise. And obviously 0-4, well, mathematically speaking, they're not done yet, but it's not pretty. Odds are very high that neither of those teams will be in the Super Bowl in February. But you know what? The Giants and the Jets have just been a disappointment for New York. You figure they'd be able to at least win one game out of those first 8. The crazy thing is the Chiefs on the strangest Monday Night Football you'll ever see, which is not technically Monday Night Football because of copyright issues, I guess. The Chiefs became 4-0 and became somehow the first team to go 4-0 in 4 consecutive years. Giants and the Jets, the entire New York sports team, well, unless you count Buffalo, the entire New York football scene has no wins for 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's not pretty for sure. The Giants, I have a little bit more hope because they're in the NFL's worst division ever. So they're still somehow only a game out of first place despite their 0-4 start. But start with the Jets because the Jets played on Thursday in Denver. I did an instant reaction to that on my blog last week, and it just got us to show you. I mean, it just feels like there's nothing there because the coach is bad. The quarterback is running for his life. He's hurt now. They have so many injuries. As a Jet fan, I just don't know what I have to look forward to this year.
Well, the funny thing is with the Giants, I think the Giants have a very underrated defense. And the truth is, if not for maybe one bad Jones turnover in each of those games, they could actually be 3-1, if not 4-0, because he had a couple of. It was a pick against the Steelers, the one pick against the Niners before the half, and then the pick at the end of the Rams game. So the Giants actually have a very strong defense, but the Jets has been really tough to watch if you're a Jets fan. You know what? That offensive line has struggled, and the fact that Darnold not only went down, but there was no call on that play. I was surprised there was no roughing the passer call on that play.
Yeah, I just say as far as that play goes, I mean, I think it's just the lack of respect the league has to the Jets right now. I mean, if somebody did that to Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, that guy might get thrown out of the game, let alone get a 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness. Yeah,
well, the sad thing is, the NFL really should be throwing more guys out of games anyway, considering college football actually does that. But for some reason, they haven't adapted for that type of player safety. But you know what? Yeah, I don't know why. The officiating in general, I thought was pretty poor in that game. But the fact that the Jets allowed 37 points to Brett Rippon, who I'm sure is a fine young quarterback, and he's probably a lot better than I am. But it was his first. I think it was his first game, and the fact that they gave up 37 points is ridiculous. Though I will give them credit for putting up 28 without Darnold for most of that game. And you know what? That touchdown run was maybe the highlight of the year for the Jets. That touchdown run by Darnold, and I think that shows that he is not the problem, that the offensive line and potentially or Gase is the problem.
Yeah, well, Darnold's not exactly lighting up the stage by himself. He's still making mistakes that are bad. The Jets, I think we know, they're going probably 1-15, 2-14. They go in line for the top pick. The Giants this week, they did look much more productive against the Rams. They were in that game a long time. They were down 10-9 in the fourth quarter before Cooper Kupp breaks the touchdown and make it wide open. I will say, you're right about the Daniel Jones turnover thing because I remember that game against the Steelers and they were driving down. He throws the pick in the red zone the whole game turn. He has the big costly fumble late. He had a big turnover against the Bears. I feel like the Giants, if Daniel Jones can get the turnovers under control, I feel like they have a chance to win a couple here because the defense has been competitive for the most part.
Well, you know what? With the Cowboy game, they might have a shot on Sunday because one, the Cowboys have underperformed, and I've said I don't think that defense is as good as people say. They lost some guys. The secondary is weak, and they've just been inconsistent despite Dak Prescott's solid play. But, I was watching that Giants-Steelers game, and I remember looking at that drive, and until they threw that pick, I was thinking, wow, they brought in Joe Judge. They brought in a Belichick guy, a part of the Parcells tree. This is really old Giants football, smash mouth football. You hold the ball. They held the ball, I think, for 8 minutes on that drive, a couple of yards of play, and it looked like old-time Giants. Or Coughlin as well. It looked like something like that. And then he throws the pick, and it turns the whole thing around. That turned the whole game. The Giants could have, not to say that the Giants really deserve to be 3-1, but especially on the offense. But they blew a couple. Jones blew a couple of opportunities there.
Yeah, so let's go to the $1 million question here because obviously they're both winless. Who do you think gets the win first here, the Giants or the Jets?
I am going to say the Giants because next week they play Washington. I don't think the Giants are going to. I don't think the Giants are going to beat Dallas. Although I think they have a fair chance considering how bad the division is, how strong their defense has been, and how weak the Cowboy defense has been. But I say the Giants because Giants play Washington next week. I know Washington had that stunning Week 1 win over the Eagles. I'd take the Giants in that game. Meanwhile, the Jets have to face Kyler Murray and a guy that I think is actually going to be the quarterback of the future in Justin Herbert for the Chargers. I think the Jets lose both of those games. I think the Giants are the first team to get a win.
I agree with you right there. I think next week in watching it is the Giants' spot to get a win. And I think they have an outside shot at beating Dallas, depending on how the Dallas defense plays that game. The Jets, I don't think they have a shot at a win until Miami. I think they played them sandwich around the bye, those two games. If the win's not there, I don't know when it is.
Well, you know what the funny thing out of all of that? I think Miami is really underrated because I've loved the way Ryan Fitzpatrick plays for a long time. And I don't think that game last year against the Patriots was a fluke in Week 17. I think Brian Flores really is one of a couple of guys, along with Mike Vrabel, that finally learned how to be a good head coach to come out of Belichick's shadow. That's a team with really strong fundamentals and a team that, depending on how they transition to Tua Tagovailoa once he becomes the starting quarterback, assuming he becomes the starting quarterback, that team I think is going to be pretty dangerous in the AFC East and should be a challenger to Buffalo and somewhat New England.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at the games that are coming up here. You mentioned the Giants-Cowboys. I think the key to that game, in my opinion, is just like how the Giants managed to move the ball against that Dallas defense, because Dallas's offense is great. They'll score points against anybody. So if the Giants are able to keep the ball, move the ball down, score some touchdowns, I think they could keep this close.
Yeah, well, I think the most important statistic for any football game besides the score is time of possession. And the Giants had that for a second there, as I mentioned, with that drive against the Steelers. The Giants-Niners game, the defense really collapsed despite facing Nick Mullins, who's an adequate quarterback, but he's not Garoppolo. They stumbled in that game because the Niners had the ball for so long, and the Giants could not hold possession. The Rams game, I believe the Giants actually outpossessed the Rams, but the problem is they just couldn't get the ball into the end zone. So if the Giants can hold on to the football for a long time and just limit the turnovers, they've got a shot. But yeah, Dallas is probably going to win that game.
Yeah, and the Jets-Cardinals, the Cardinals are going off 2 straight losses, flying out east again after losing to Carolina this week. The things that concern me for the Jets is obviously Sam Darnold might not play this game because he's coming off the shoulder injury, but he finished the Denver game out, but came in sore the next day. Joe Flacco's a statue in the pocket as the backup, so that's not going to be great. And the Jets, the thing that's underrated about this game is that their linebackers and safety are so bad in coverage that they don't really have the speed to contain Kyler Murray if he breaks the pocket, because the way to beat them is to keep him in the pocket and make him throw right now, and I don't think they can do that.
Cardinals are almost certainly going to win this game, but the Jets might have a chance if they can run the ball effectively, because God knows they cannot pass block for anything. The Giants at least improved somewhat in terms of pass blocking, but they can't run block for anything. The Jets can't pass block, but we'll see if they can run block for, I guess it's Frank Gore. I don't know. Frank Gore, who, God bless him, is still going in this league. But yeah, odds are Arizona's going to blow out this one.
Yeah, Frank Gore is the running back right now. Le'Veon Bell's eligible to come off the IR this week. We'll see if he's ready to go. But let's get to the picks for the week, which is the reason you're here. My good buddy Will Smith, not the actor or the baseball player, was on the podcast last week for Teen Challengers. He went 1-2 on the week. He had the Cowboys laying 4.5 points against the Browns. That turned into disastrous. Cleveland put up almost 50. He had the Saints laying 4.5 in Detroit. He won that one. He had the Falcons last night getting 7 points against the Packers. That did not go well. So 1-2 on the week for Will's picks. I, on the other hand, I had a better week. I went 2-1. I laid the 3 with the Broncos against the Jets. They blew them out at the end of the game there. I had the Seahawks laying 6.5 in Miami. It was a game tighter than I expected. They won by 9. And I had the Bears plus 2.5 against the Colts. That one was not pretty because Nick Foles not moving the ball, and I did not know the Colt defense was that good.
Well, the Colts are an underrated team. I think Quentin Nelson is really solid at guard, but that's a team that's really developed defensively. It's a good, sound, fundamental football team. Houston's choked. Jacksonville, we don't really know what Jacksonville is. It's going to be Indianapolis that might give Tennessee a run for their money in that division. So,
yep. To reset the standings on the year, Team Challengers is 9-3. I'm 10-2, so it's a tight race going into week number 5. We're going to make our picks right now. Chris, you are up first with your first pick of the week. Where are you going?
I am going with the Houston Texans, favored by 6 over the Jacksonville Jaguars. It is the first game since Bill O'Brien's long-awaited firing, so this team will finally be fired up and finally freed from his restraints. I am taking the Texans over the Jaguars in that one.
Yeah, it's a very interesting matchup, that game, because this is a game where you look at the number and you're like, the Texans shouldn't be favored by this much, but I think Bill O getting fired does change things a bit. Maybe they play a little looser, a little freer. The Jags are competitive. They can be in this game, but you know what? The Bill O factor does change. I do like that pick, Chris. Where are you going to the next one?
I am going to take a stunning upset. I am taking the aforementioned Miami Dolphins over the San Francisco 49ers, who are favored by 8 points. Last week, the Niners choked against an Eagles team that is probably actually worse than the Dolphins are. Fitzpatrick still has the stuff to win some games, and with Flores at the helm, I've said it before, I'm going to say these words again, the Dolphins are a fundamentally sound team. I take the Dolphins over the Niners.
Interesting pick there, because the number is big, and the question with that game is, like, if Jimmy Garoppolo is back, because if Garoppolo is back, I'd like the Niners to win that game, but the number's big at 8. The Dolphins are a feisty team. I know they're traveling out there, but I could see the logic on it. I could see that pick making sense. Let's go to your third pick of the week. Where are you going?
Third and final pick, I'm going with the Indianapolis Colts, favored by 2.5 over the Cleveland Browns. So we mentioned that the Colts either proved themselves or really proved the Bears are worse than their previously unbeaten record said. I said the Bears were a team that was probably the worst undefeated team in the league. They finally lost. We're going to see if the Colts can prove it. It proved that that win was legit. The Browns might get a little cocky after beating a Dallas team that doesn't have as strong a defense as people say. I am taking the Colts over the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, that game's a lot of fun. I think it's one of the underrated games of the week. I'm going to try and make a point to watch it if I can get onto the red zone quick enough. I do think it's one I'm going to stay away from because the number is very tight. But I think if you like the winner there, that's the way to go. And I think it's a good job with the Colts there. I'm going to be up right now. My 3 picks for the week. Pick number 1, I'm going to the biggest number on the board here. I'm going to take the Ravens laying 13.5 points at home against the Cincinnati Bengals. I know Joe Burrow has looked great the first couple of weeks of the season, but Cincinnati's still not a good football team. Their defense still gives up a ton of points. They get gassed on the ground, which is not good for a Raven team that likes to run the football. It's a game team Lamar Jackson had 5 touchdowns against in 2 games last year. I think it's a game with the Ravens we saw last week didn't even have to do that much, and they beat up Washington pretty badly. I think they're going to blow the Bengals out here. 14's a big number here, but let me the Ravens laying 13.5 points to blow out the Bengals. Pick 1.
Well, the Ravens also are still trying to prove something after that huge loss to the Chiefs that just blew them out of the water. So, yeah, I'd agree with you on that one.
All right, that's pick number 1. Pick number 2, I'm going to be doing this every week because I do not trust the Jets. I'm taking the Cardinals laying the 7 points on the road against the Jets. This is a team where Adam Gase consistently finds ways to get blown out as the head coach. The Jets might not have Darnold in this game. Joe Flacco could be starting, which I don't think is going to help them that much. They could get some guys back, but as I mentioned before, they don't have the personnel to cover Arizona defensively. The secondary will have issues covering all those receivers. Kyler Murray will make a ton of big plays. I think the Cardinals win by at least 10 points. I'm going to lay the 7 with the Cardinals, pick 2.
Yeah, 7 is probably the bare minimum in this one. The Cardinals, I think, are going to do to the Jets what the Jets did to the Cardinals when they came to the Meadowlands back in 2008. You know, the difference is the Jets might not score any points. Cardinals put up, I think, 35 in that game. Jets might not score at all.
I think they'll score some points because Arizona's defense is not great. I'm predicting something like a 28-10 loss for the Jets. That's my prediction.
That's fair.
All right, last pick of the week. I'm going with an underdog. I'm going to Monday Night Football. I'm taking the Chargers, getting 7.5 points in New Orleans against the Saints. And the Saints defense is the reason why I'm making this pick because Justin Herbert has looked good. I know having Austin Eckler out this game will hurt, but the thing that the Saints scared me is I like that team going into the year. They're my pick to go to the Super Bowl this year and probably win it. But the thing is their defense has been so underwhelming that they cannot close opponents out. Last week they had that big rally against the Lions that they fell down early. They let the Lions come back into that game. They only won by 6. I'm getting a half-point hook here, so the Saints could still win by a touchdown. I could still cover the number. I think they can do that. So I'm going to take the Chargers, getting the 7.5 points, pick number 3 this week.
That's a fair That's a fair point. That being said, I would still say the Saints would win that game because I think Breeze finally rebounded in that Lions game despite that blown lead late.
Yeah, he did rebound. They might get Michael Thomas back this week, which would be huge, but I just don't trust their defense. I could see this being a situation where they're up 10 late, Chargers are going down the field, get the touchdown, get down 3, and then they don't get the onside kick and lose. That way I still cover the number. All right, to reset the picks for this week, Chris has gone with the Miami Dolphins getting 8 points in San Francisco against the 49ers. The Indianapolis Colts laying 2.5 points on the road against the Cleveland Browns. And the newly Bill O'Brien-less Texans laying 6 at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm taking the Ravens laying 13.5 at home against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Arizona Cardinals laying 7 at home against the New York Jets. And the Los Angeles Chargers on Monday night getting 7.5, points in New Orleans against the Saints. And those are your picks for week number 5 here on the podcast. Next week, I'm going to be joined by another Giants fan, the great Phil Lombardo, who's been on the podcast many times before. And we will see if we are going to be talking about a Giant victory next week. I'm not sure about that.
I don't know. I mean, Dallas, that's going to be a tough game. I think they'll make it close. But no, I would, as an unbiased, speaking objectively, speaking as an unbiased observer, I'd take Dallas in that game. They got a good shot against Washington, though.
Yeah, I think the Giants, the number, we didn't pick it this week. The Giants are 9.5 point underdogs as of recording. I think they could cover the number. I think this could be a game they lose by a touchdown, but I still think Dallas wins the game.
Yeah, I think 9.5 is a little unfair since the Giants lost by 8 to a Rams team that beat the Cowboys earlier this year. Granted on a pass interference call that was questioned, but a Rams team that did beat Dallas, and Dallas has gone downhill since then.
Yeah, and Dallas's defense is why I don't like that number, because Dallas is getting up, I think, the last 3 weeks, like 34, 36, and 49 points the last 3 weeks, which is a bit absurd.
Yeah, it's been a massacre for the Cowboys.
All right, Chris, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can people follow on social media and keep up with some of the stuff you're up to?
Yeah, so you can get me on Twitter at Chris Russo, CHRISRUSSO 98.
All right, Chris, sounds good. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Mike, it's been a great pleasure again.
All right, that was Chris Russo doing your Week 5 NFL picks. Up next, I'm going to talk a little movies with our resident movie critic on the podcast, John Stanko, right after this.